He was on his knees inside a tower that cost more than he'd earn in 100 lifetimes, rewiring a broken chandelier with hands that once designed buildings like this one. Then the elevator opened, and she stepped out in a coat the color of deep wine, and their eyes met for exactly 2 seconds before everything he had spent 6 years burying started clawing its way back to the surface. She knew him. She didn't know how, but she knew. And before this winter ended, one of them was going to lose everything all over again. If this story reaches you, please hit like and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far Adrian and Elena's story travels tonight. Now, let me tell you how it began. The freight elevator at the Meridian Tower had a specific kind of groan, a low metallic complaint that every maintenance worker in the building had learned to translate. Adrian Cross heard it through the soles of his boots before he heard it with his ears. He was standing on the 10th floor, a service level most residents never saw, holding a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago and staring at a work order that made no sense. Penthouse suite, chandelier malfunction, urgent, urgent. In a building where people complained about the angle of their morning sunlight, urgent could mean anything from a house fire to a burnt-out bulb. Adrian had stopped trying to guess. He folded the work order, tucked it into the pocket of his navy coveralls, and pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator climbed slowly. He watched the numbers change and thought about his daughter. Lena had been up twice last night. The first time was the usual nightmare, the one where her mother walked out of her room and never came back. The second time she had simply wanted water, but she had stayed awake for almost an hour in his arms, telling him about a drawing she was making at school. A house with 4 windows and a dog that didn't exist. Adrian had nodded along in the dark, stroking her hair, and when she finally fell asleep, he had carried her back to her own bed and stood in the doorway watching her chest rise and fall like he could keep her safe just by witnessing it. That had been at 2 in the morning. His alarm had gone off at 5. The elevator dinged. The doors opened onto a hallway so quiet it felt rude to breathe in it. Cream marble, brushed gold fixtures, a single orchid on a console table that was probably worth more than his car. Adrian shifted the strap of his tool bag and walked toward Suite 47B. A woman was waiting for him. She stood with her back to the entry window, looking out over the gray December skyline of the city, one hand loose at her side and the other holding a phone she wasn't looking at. She wore a dark burgundy coat, unbuttoned, over a cream-colored blouse and tailored trousers. Her hair was pulled back in a low knot, not severe, just efficient. When she turned to look at him, Adrian understood 2 things at once. She wasn't a resident, and she wasn't expecting a maintenance worker to notice any of that. "You're the electrician?" she asked. "Maintenance," Adrian said. "Electrical is part of it. The chandelier in the main sitting room hasn't worked in 3 days. My assistant submitted the request yesterday. I was told it would be handled this morning." Her voice was measured, neither rude nor friendly. She was testing for something, Adrian thought, though he couldn't tell what. "The request got routed through the property management office this morning," he said. "I came as soon as they sent it." She studied him a moment longer, then stepped aside. "It's this way." He followed her through a pair of double doors into a room that made him stop for just a second. Not from being impressed, though it was undeniably impressive. He stopped because he recognized it. Not the furniture, not the view, but the bones of the room itself. The proportions. The way the ceiling height had been calculated to hold exactly the kind of fixture that was hanging dead and dark above them. He had seen these blueprints before. A long time ago, in a different life, he had spent a week arguing with a contractor about whether the load-bearing beam in this exact ceiling could support what the client wanted. Adrian kept his face neutral. He set his tool bag on a folded drop cloth the housekeeper had apparently left for him and looked up at the chandelier. "How long has it been dead?" he asked. 3 days, like I said." "Before that? Any flickering, any warm smell, any tripped breakers?" She frowned slightly. "The housekeeper mentioned it flickering about a week before it went out. I wasn't staying here at the time." "Okay." He unfolded his ladder, checked the legs, and climbed up slowly. The chandelier was enormous, an absurd waterfall of crystal that some designer had picked because it photographed well. Adrian had seen 100 of these installed wrong. Too much weight on a junction box that was meant for a ceiling fan, or a dimmer circuit that couldn't handle the load. He reached into his chest pocket for a voltage tester and touched it to the first contact. Nothing. He climbed down, walked to the breaker panel tucked discreetly behind a cabinet door, and checked the labels. Someone had relabeled them in tiny, careful handwriting. He reset the one marked sitting/main and climbed back up. Still nothing. It's not the breaker, he said, almost to himself. What is it then? He glanced down. She had moved closer. Not close enough to be in his way, but close enough to see what he was doing. Most people in her tax bracket, in his experience, retreated into another room when the work started. Some disappeared entirely. This one was watching. The junction box, Adrian said. It's probably burned. A chandelier this size pulls more current than the original builder probably planned for. If the wiring upstream is undersized, it cooks itself slowly. Can you fix it? I can fix it today. Whether it stays fixed depends on whether anyone wants to do it right. She tilted her head slightly. What does doing it right mean? Adrian realized too late that he had slipped into a register he hadn't used in years. He climbed down the ladder and busied himself with his tool bag. It means pulling heavier gauge wire from the panel to the box, installing a properly rated dimmer, and resetting the mount so the weight sits on the joist instead of the drywall anchor someone used. He wiped his hands on a rag. Ma'am. She didn't react to the ma'am. She was still watching him, and something in her expression had shifted. Not suspicion, more like somebody who had heard a note played out of tune and was trying to decide whether it was an accident or a choice. You know this building, she said. I work here. No, you know this building. Adrian met her eyes for the first time. They were dark, steady, more tired than the rest of her put together. Up close, she looked younger than he had assumed at first glance, maybe 28, 29. There was a small scar at the corner of her left eyebrow, pale and old. She wasn't wearing makeup. I've worked here 6 months, he said carefully. You learn a building. She kept looking at him. Then she nodded once, like she had filed something away, and stepped back. Do what you need to do, she said. I'll be in the study. She walked out. Adrian exhaled slowly and stared up at the dead chandelier. Don't, he told himself. Don't start thinking. Fix it and go. He worked for almost 2 hours. He was not hurrying, but he wasn't dragging either. At one point, he had to go down to his truck in the service garage for a coil of 12-gauge wire, and when he came back up the hallway outside, 47B smelled faintly of coffee. The door had been left open for him. He found her at a desk in a room that was clearly meant to be a library, but had been converted into an office. Her burgundy coat was thrown over the back of a chair. She was reading something on a laptop screen and didn't look up immediately when he cleared his throat. It's running, he said. I pulled new wire from the panel and replaced the junction. The old mount was cracked. I reinforced it. It'll hold. You should get a licensed electrician to come back in and certify the work for your records, just so your insurance doesn't give you grief if anything happens later. Finally, she looked up. You did that in 2 hours? Most of it was waiting for the glue on the mount to set. She closed the laptop. What's your name? Adrian. Adrian what? He hesitated for half a second. It shouldn't have mattered. It was on the ID card clipped to his chest. Cross. Adrian Cross. She said it slowly, testing it. I'm Elena Vale. He nodded. The name meant nothing to him at first. Then it did. Vale. Vale Holdings. Vale had owned this building's ground lease since before it was finished. Edward Vale had been a name that circulated in certain rooms 6, 7 years ago, back when Adrian still existed in rooms like that. He had died last spring, Adrian remembered reading. Heart attack in Geneva. He had left behind a company and no obvious heir. Apparently there had been one after all. Pleased to meet you, Adrian said. It came out flat, and he knew it sounded flat. Elena Vale smiled, a small, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thank you for the repair, Mr. Cross. I'll make sure maintenance is notified the work is complete. Have a good afternoon. He turned to leave. Mr. Cross? He stopped in the doorway. He didn't turn around right away. He already knew what kind of question was coming because he had heard variations of it before from clients and contractors, and once from a journalist in a courthouse parking lot. It was the question that always came when somebody looked at him and couldn't make the math add up. He turned. Yes? Elena was standing now. She had walked around the desk. She was holding a pen, which she turned slowly between her fingers. Have we met before? She asked. No. You're sure? I'd remember, Adrian said. That small smile again. I have a good memory for faces. I don't think we've met, but you look familiar. Have you worked at any of our other properties? I came on with the building management company, not Vale Holdings, he said. This is the only Vale property I've been in. She nodded, but she didn't look satisfied. Well, thank you again. Ma'am, he got out of the room and down the hallway and into the elevator before he let himself breathe. He jabbed the button for the service garage and watched the numbers count down, and his hands, which had been perfectly steady on a ladder for 2 hours, were shaking. He picked Lena up from school at 3:15. She came barreling out of the building in a red coat 2 sizes too big, a hand-me-down from a co-worker's daughter that Adrian had been waiting for her to grow into. Her backpack bounced against her spine. She had a piece of construction paper clutched in her fist, and she was already waving it at him before she reached the truck. Dad! Dad, look! Adrian leaned across the passenger seat and pushed the door open. Whoa, careful. Show me inside. She scrambled up onto the bench seat, kicking her boots against the dashboard, and thrust the paper into his lap. It was a drawing. A house, a very square house, with 4 windows and a sun that had a face and what might have been a dog or a very furry rabbit. Mrs. Arnold said mine was the best one, Lena said, breathless. She put a sticker on it. Look, a gold one. She said gold is the highest sticker. That's because you drew a great house. It's our house. Adrian glanced at her. Our apartment? Our house. The one we're going to have. Remember you said. He remembered. He had said, sometime in October when she had been crying about a kid at school who had a backyard and a trampoline, that maybe one day, not this year, but one day, they would have a house with a backyard. He had said it the way parents say things when they don't want to see their kid disappointed. He hadn't meant it as a promise. She had received it as one. Yeah, he said, I remember. Good. So I drew it. She buckled her seatbelt and turned the radio on. She liked the oldies station for reasons Adrian couldn't explain, and she sang along to a song she didn't know the words to the whole way home. Their apartment was on the 4th floor of a building on the edge of the old warehouse district. The elevator was broken more often than it worked. Adrian had stopped minding. The walk-up kept him in shape, and it had taught Lena how to count past 40. She counted the steps every single time they climbed them. 42, she announced as they reached the landing. 42 is an even number. Yes, it is. Is 43 odd? Yes. Why? Because odd and even take turns. That's not a real answer. Adrian laughed, actually laughed for the first time that day, and unlocked the door. No, it isn't. I'll give you a real one when I've had some coffee. Inside, the apartment was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened onto the living room, a bathroom with a shower head that leaked if you didn't close it exactly right. The furniture was mismatched. The couch had been free from a coworker. The coffee table was from a curbside. The one thing Adrian had spent real money on was the kitchen table, a solid oak piece he had found at an estate sale, because he wanted Lena to have a place to do her homework that felt like a proper table. He set down his tool bag, hung up Lena's red coat, and started pulling together dinner. Pasta. Again. He kept meaning to expand the rotation, but time was not on his side. While the water boiled, he stood at the counter and thought about Elena Vale. You look familiar. 6 years. 6 years of keeping his head down. 6 years of moving from one maintenance job to another, never staying long enough in one place for anyone to start asking too many questions. He had gotten good at being invisible. He had dropped 30 pounds in the first year after everything fell apart, partly from stress and partly because he couldn't afford to eat much. And the weight had never really come back. He wore coveralls and a cap, and he kept his hair short and his beard trimmed, and he answered politely and didn't volunteer information. Most people didn't look at him twice. Elena Vale had looked at him 3 times. Dad? He turned. Lena was at the kitchen table with her homework folder open. Yeah, baby. Is pasta done? Almost. Do your spelling. Okay? He stirred the pot. He told himself she hadn't recognized him. There was no way. He had not been a public figure. His face had been in 2 newspaper articles and 1 local news segment, all of them 6.5 years ago, and even then he had been thinner, younger, cleaner. He had been the junior designer, not the face of the firm. The photographs they had used had been from his company headshot, taken when he was 26, a different person entirely. There was no way Elena Vale had seen that and connected it to the man fixing her chandelier. And yet, Vale. Edward. Vale had not been directly connected to the Harrogate scandal. The names that had come up in the articles had been other developers, other firms, other money. But Edward Vale moved in those circles. His company had partnered with two of the firms that had been investigated and never charged. If Elena had taken over the company this year, she would have been going through old records, contracts, board minutes, client lists. His name could be on some of those papers. His name had been on a lot of papers once. Adrian pulled the pasta off the burner and drained it into the sink. Steam rose around his face, and he closed his eyes for a second. He had a child. He had a life. A small and tired life. But a life. He fixed chandeliers, and he picked his daughter up from school, and he made pasta. That was enough. That had to be enough. He wasn't going back. He had almost convinced himself of that by the time Lena was in bed. She was a good reader for her age, though she didn't always want to show it. She read aloud from a chapter book about a girl who lived on a horse farm, stumbling over names of horses that didn't sound like any word she had ever heard before. Adrian sat on the edge of her bed and corrected her gently. A peep A-L-O-O-S-A? Appaloosa. That's it. That's a silly word for a horse. It's a type, a breed. Like golden retriever is a type of dog. I still want a golden retriever. I know you do. She closed the book and looked up at him. Dad? Mrs. Arnold said some kids' dads come to the school for job day. Adrian felt his chest tighten. Job day? Like, they come and talk about their job, and we ask them questions. When is this? Next month. She said it's not for everybody, just some dads. And moms. She fidgeted with the edge of her blanket. Can you come? He didn't answer right away. He tried to picture himself standing in front of a room of 6-year-olds in his coveralls, explaining that his job was to fix things when they broke. It wouldn't be a bad thing for Lena. Kids at that age loved anything involving tools. He could bring a flashlight and a multimeter. He could make it fun. But he knew, even as he thought it, that Lena wasn't asking because she wanted to see him with a flashlight. She was asking because some other kid was bringing their dad, and their dad was a lawyer or a doctor or owned a restaurant, and she wanted hers to come too. I'll see if I can get the day off, he said. Promise? I'll try, kiddo, really try. Okay. She rolled onto her side and pulled her stuffed elephant against her chest. The elephant was named Bartholomew, a name Lena had chosen when she was 4 because she had heard it on a television show and thought it sounded important. Dad? Yeah. What's your job called? Adrian paused in the doorway. Maintenance technician. Technician. She tried the word in her mouth. That sounds important. It's a living, he said, and he turned off the light. He didn't go to sleep right away. He sat on the couch with a beer he didn't really want and the television on with the sound off. Some late-night show. He wasn't watching it. He was looking at a framed photograph on the side table. It was the only picture he had kept from his old life, and he had kept it because Lena was in it. She was one in the picture, maybe 14 months. He was holding her on one hip and laughing at something the photographer had said. He was wearing a suit. His mother had sent him the suit when he got hired at Mercer and Holbrook Design, the firm that had recruited him out of graduate school. His hair was longer then. He looked like somebody with a future. The other person in the photograph had been cut out. The frame hid the cut neatly, but he knew where the scissors had gone. His wife. Lena's mother, Sarah. She had left when Lena was 2, not because of the scandal, but because of what the scandal had done to him. She had told him, the night she packed her car, that she had married the man in the picture, and she was leaving the man on the couch. He hadn't argued with her. He hadn't had the energy. She sent cards on Lena's birthday. She lived in Colorado now, with someone else, and Adrian did not begrudge her any of it. He just wished, sometimes, that Lena had a memory of her that wasn't a photograph. He drained the beer and stood up. His phone was on the coffee table, face down. He flipped it over. No messages. He thought about Elena Vale again, and the way she had said, "You know this building," and the way her eyes hadn't left his face. He put the phone back down and went to bed. The next week passed without incident. He worked a shift at the Meridian Tower on Monday, but the work order took him to the second-floor gym, where a treadmill had thrown a belt, and he didn't see anyone he didn't expect to see. Tuesday and Wednesday, he was at a smaller property across town, a condominium complex where somebody's dishwasher had flooded 3 apartments. Thursday, he was back at the Meridian, in the parking garage, replacing a broken sensor on the resident's gate. He was halfway through that job, lying on his back under the gate arm with a flashlight in his teeth, when a pair of heels stopped beside him. He knew whose heels they were before he looked. Burgundy, polished, not showy, but expensive. He pulled the flashlight out of his mouth and tilted his head. Miss Vale. Mr. Cross. She was holding a to-go coffee cup. She was alone. The garage was cold enough that her breath showed when she spoke. "Something wrong with your gate?" he asked, because it seemed safer than asking why she was down here. "My car is parked in the visitor row," she said. "I was walking to it. I saw a pair of boots." A pair of boots is usually a maintenance worker. Apparently, he pushed himself out from under the arm and stood up. He was taller than her by a good 6 inches, which he hadn't noticed upstairs because she had been standing near a window. He wiped his hands on his pant leg. "Is there anything I can help you with?" "The chandelier is still working." "Good. I wanted to thank you." "You did, last week." "I wanted to thank you again." There was a silence. She took a sip of her coffee. He realized she was trying to figure out how to say something and hadn't quite worked up to it yet. He could wait. He was good at waiting. "Mr. Cross," she said finally, "do you know the name Martin Halbrook?" Something in him went very, very still. "Why?" "Answer the question, please." "I've heard the name. He's a developer." "He's dead." Adrian blinked. "I hadn't heard that." "It hasn't been reported yet. He had a stroke on Sunday. He's in a hospital in Zurich, not expected to recover." "I'm sorry to hear it." She watched him. He tried to make his face nothing. The muscle in his jaw was betraying him. He could feel it, a tiny tick he had never been able to control when he was rattled. "Mr. Cross," she said, "I think you should come upstairs. I'm on the clock. I know the building management company. I'll clear it with them." "Ms. Vale." "Adrian." She said his first name quietly, almost kindly, and it disarmed him more than anything else could have. "I'm not trying to cause you any trouble. I'm asking you to come upstairs for 10 minutes, and then I won't ask you anything again if that's what you want. But I think we need to talk." He looked at her for a long moment. He thought about Lena at school, drawing a house with 4 windows. He thought about the picture on his side table. He thought about every time in the last 6 years that he had chosen silence and walking away. He could walk away now. He could finish the gate sensor, tell his supervisor he had a family emergency, and never come back to this building. He had done it before. He had done it 3 times before, in other cities, when other people had started to look too closely. But Lena was in this school. She had a teacher she liked. She had a drawing with a gold sticker on it hanging on the refrigerator. He was tired. 10 minutes, he said. The ride up in the elevator was silent. She didn't try to make small talk. He was grateful for that. He stared at the numbers, and he thought about what he would say and what he wouldn't. In the apartment, she took off her coat and hung it on a hook by the door. She gestured to the kitchen. "Coffee?" "Sure." She poured 2 cups from a machine that probably cost more than his rent and handed him one. The mug was heavy, hand-thrown ceramic, the kind of thing you bought at a craft fair and then kept forever. She sat down on a stool at the kitchen island. He stayed standing. "I'll be direct," she said. "I've been going through my uncle's records since I took over the company in July. It's a mess. He didn't believe in digital filing. There are rooms, actual rooms, full of paper, contracts, correspondence, memos. I've hired 2 archivists and a forensic accountant, and we're still only maybe a third of the way through." Adrian drank the coffee. It was very good coffee. "Last month," she continued, "I found a folder marked Harrogate 2019. It was in a drawer in my uncle's personal safe. Not a business safe, a personal one. Whatever was in that folder, he wanted it separate." He didn't move. There were 12 items in the folder. One of them was a photograph. It was a copy of a headshot attached to a memo. The memo said, in substance, that the young man in the photograph had been, quote, "dealt with," and that his firm had agreed to isolate him from any further involvement in the project. Adrian set the mug down carefully on the counter. The young man in the photograph, Elena said, was you. He let out a breath. He had not realized he was holding it. Ms. Vale, Elena. His voice was rough. Why are you telling me this? Because I didn't know who you were when I found the photograph. The memo had a different name on it. Adrian Matthew Crossford. That's my full name, was my full name. I did some looking, not formal. I didn't involve anyone from the company. I spent an evening on the internet and another evening in the paper archives of 2 news publications. The story I found was a very small story, Mr. Cross. 2 articles, 7 paragraphs each, and a 20-second television segment that got about 4,000 views. The story was that a junior designer at Mercer and Holbrook had leaked confidential documents to a journalist, was terminated, and was being sued by the firm. The firm's lawsuit was settled out of court, and the designer's career was over. That's the story, yeah. That's the story that was told. He looked at her. What's the other story? Elena asked. He shook his head slowly. You don't want to do this. I do. You don't. You have a company. You have a name. Your uncle spent 40 years building what you have. If you start pulling on this thread, you're not going to like what comes up. I've already started. You can stop. Mr. Cross, she said, and her voice was gentle but also very firm. Somebody, 6 years ago, destroyed a 26-year-old designer because he refused to sign off on shortcuts in a residential tower that was going to house 400 families. I know that's what happened because I found the letter where my uncle was told it had been handled. I haven't figured out yet if my uncle ordered it or if he just knew. But I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out whether you help me or not. I'd rather you helped me. Was Satanen. Adrian braced his hands on the edge of the counter and stared down at the stone. He thought about the Harrogate Towers. He had not thought about them by name in a long time. He had taught himself not to. They had been built anyway, after everything. He had driven past them once, 2 years ago, on a job in the eastern part of the city, and he had made himself look at them from the highway. They were still standing. They hadn't collapsed. 400 families lived in them. As far as he knew, none of the shortcuts he had flagged had ever caused a single injury. He had told himself that day on the highway that he should be glad about that. He had tried to be glad. He had been unable. Why? He said, and his voice came out quieter than he meant it to. Why do you care? You don't know me. You have a company to run. This doesn't have to be your problem. Elena Vale was quiet for a long time. My uncle raised me, she said finally. My parents died in a car accident when I was 11. He took me in. He was not a warm man, but he was fair to me. He paid for my school. He taught me how to read a balance sheet. When he died in April, I cried at his funeral, and I meant it. Adrian nodded. He didn't know what else to do. And then I inherited his company, and I started going through his papers, and I found a folder with your photograph in it. Her voice didn't waver, but her hand had tightened around her own mug. Mr. Cross, if my uncle was the kind of man who could do that to a 26-year-old, I need to know. I need to know what I'm sitting on. I need to know what I've been given. I can't lead this company without knowing. He said nothing. And, she said, softer, I keep coming back to the photograph. You were very young. You looked like somebody who believed things. I don't have a lot of people in my life right now who believe things. It matters to me that one of you is still out there. He looked up at her then. I'm not him anymore, Adrian said. I'm not asking you to be. I have a daughter. She's 6. She doesn't know any of this. She thinks her dad fixes chandeliers. If this gets out, if anybody starts poking around, I lose this job and I lose the next one, and she loses the school she finally likes. I've moved her twice already. I can't do it again. Elena nodded slowly. Nothing gets out because of me, she said. I won't speak to a reporter. I won't speak to anyone in the company. I won't tell anyone your name. I am asking you, as one person to another, to tell me what happened, in this kitchen, just to me, so I can decide what to do. He took a long breath. He thought about Sarah's face the night she left. I married the man in the picture. He thought about the journalist who had called him 12 times, in the month after he had given her the documents, and how he had stopped answering after the 8th call. He thought about the day Martin Halbrook's lawyer had explained to him, very slowly and very kindly, that his career in this industry was over, and that he should be grateful no criminal charges had been filed. Martin Hallbrook was dying in Zurich now. Adrian had not known that an hour ago, and he would have said, if asked, that he felt nothing about the man one way or another. He wasn't sure that was true anymore. 10 minutes, he said. 10 minutes, and then I have to go back to my gate. Okay. He sat down on the stool across from her. He put his hands flat on the counter because if he didn't, they were going to shake again. The tower was called Harrogate, he said. It was one of 3 the firm had in development that year. I was on the design team. I was the youngest person in the room, by a lot. About 4 months into the project, the structural engineer I was working with flagged a problem with the foundation specs. Elena didn't write anything down. She just listened. The engineer's name was Daniel Park. He was in his 50s, very quiet, very careful. He came to me because I was the only person on the design side who had taken his calls the week before. He showed me numbers. He showed me 2 sets of numbers. One set was what had been approved by the city. The other set was what the contractor was actually building. The difference was in the steel, a lot of difference. What happened to Daniel Park? He was taken off this project the next week, reassigned. I was told he had personal issues. I didn't believe it, but I didn't have any way to prove it. And you? I did what he asked me to do. He had given me copies of both sets of numbers. He had asked me, if anything happened to him, to get the numbers to someone who would do something with them. I waited about 3 weeks. He didn't come back. I called his home. His wife said he was sick. She sounded scared. Adrian paused. He took a drink of the coffee. It was still warm. I took the numbers to a journalist at the Dispatch. She was young. She was hungry. She didn't know anybody in the industry. I thought that was safer. I thought it would be a story about engineering standards. I didn't understand who I was dealing with. Hallbrook found out. Hallbrook found out. I was called into the senior partner's office on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, I had been walked out of the building with a box. By Friday, the Dispatch had spiked the story, and a different outlet, a smaller one, had run a story about a rogue junior designer who had leaked false information to damage his employer. By the following Monday, the firm had filed a civil suit. By the end of the month, my lawyer told me that if I signed a settlement that included a confidentiality clause, they would drop the suit and I would be free to seek employment elsewhere. If I didn't sign, they were going to take my condo, my savings, and my professional license. You signed. I signed. I had a wife and a baby. I was 26. I didn't have the spine for the other fight. Most people wouldn't have. Most people wouldn't have taken the numbers in the first place. Elena looked down at her hands. Daniel Park, she said. He died of a stroke 2 years later. He was 58. His wife called me. I don't know how she got my number. She said she wanted me to know that he had tried to reach out to me after everything, but his attorneys had told him not to. She said he wanted me to know he was sorry. Sorry for what? For bringing me into it. There was a silence. Somewhere in the apartment, a clock was ticking. Were the shortcuts in the Harrogate Towers ever corrected? Elena asked. I don't know, Adrian said. I know the building got a certificate of occupancy. I know people live in it. I haven't been able to make myself find out more than that. I can find out. I don't want to know. She looked at him carefully. Yes, you do. He didn't argue. She stood up. She walked around the island, not toward him, but toward the window. She stood with her back to him for a long moment, the way she had been standing when he first walked into the apartment a week ago. Mr. Cross, she said without turning around, I need time to think. I want you to know that I'm not going to do anything rash. I'm not going to the press. I'm not calling anyone. I'm going to keep looking through my uncle's papers. If I find more about you, I'll tell you. If I find more about the Harrogate project, I'll tell you. What we do after that, we decide together, okay? Okay. And I'd like to meet your daughter. He looked up sharply. No offense meant, Elena said. She turned. I've been in corporate boardrooms since I was 22. I've met 8 billionaires and 3 foreign ministers in the last 6 months. I don't know how to tell when a person is real anymore. You mentioned your daughter, and I could hear it in your voice. I'd like to meet her. I promise I'm not trying to be strange about this. She's 6. I know. She doesn't know who you are. She's 6. She wouldn't know who I was anyway. I'm not asking to know her. I'm asking to meet her once because I want to see the person you became when you thought no one was watching. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, the sky had gone from pale gray to that particular blue that comes just before winter dusk, when the light is still there but is gathering itself to leave. A jet passed silently across the window. "She likes hot chocolate," he said finally. "The kind from the place on Archer and Ninth." "Saturday?" "Saturday." Elena nodded once. "Thank you, Mr. Cross." "Adrian." "Adrian." He stood up. His legs were shakier than they should have been. He set the coffee mug in the sink because it was the kind of habit he couldn't unlearn, and he picked up his jacket from where he had hung it on the back of the stool. At the door, he paused. "I haven't told anyone this story in 6 years," he said. "I know." "I don't know why I just told you." She looked at him. She didn't smile exactly, but something in her face softened in a way he would think about for a long time afterward. "Maybe," she said, "you've been waiting for someone to ask." He didn't answer. He couldn't. He opened the door and walked out, and he took the elevator down, and he went back to the parking garage, and he finished replacing the gate sensor with his hand shaking so badly that it took him twice as long as it should have. When he was done, he sat in the cab of his truck for a long time, in the cold, and watched the residents of the Meridian Tower drive in and out past a gate that would now work properly for the next 10 years. At 4 minutes to 3, he started the truck and drove to the school to pick up his daughter. She came out of the building in her red coat, clutching another drawing. She climbed into the cab and buckled her seatbelt and started telling him about a boy named Peter who had eaten a crayon on a dare. Adrian listened to her, and he nodded in the right places, and he drove carefully because he had a passenger and the roads were getting icy, and because somewhere in the last 2 hours, without meaning to, without wanting to, he had started to feel, for the first time in 6 years, like a man who might have something to lose again. Saturday came with a sky the color of old pewter and a wind that cut across the river and made grown men walk faster. Adrian stood at the kitchen counter at 8 in the morning, watching Lena eat cereal in her pajamas, and tried to figure out how to tell a 6-year-old that a woman they had never met was going to join them for hot chocolate. He had been up since 5. He had cleaned the apartment, which had not needed cleaning. He had changed the sheets on Lena's bed, which had not needed changing. At one point he had stood in front of his closet and looked at the 3 shirts hanging there and felt something close to panic, which was absurd because he was not going to change out of his weekend clothes for a meeting at a coffee shop. He was not going to try to impress Elena Vale. That was not what this was. He told himself that 3 times before he moved on to making coffee. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby." "Are we going somewhere?" He looked at her. She had milk on her chin and a spoon halfway to her mouth, and she was watching him the way she watched him when she knew something was off. Lena had a radar for his moods. She had developed it young, probably because for the first 2 years of her life, her parents had been trying very hard to hide from her that their marriage was unraveling. "Yeah," he said. "I thought we'd go get hot chocolate." "At the place on Ninth?" "At the place on Ninth." "Okay." She took another bite. Then, around the cereal, she said, "Why are you being weird?" "I'm not being weird. You changed my sheets and they smelled clean last night." "They can always be cleaner." She gave him a look that was too old for her face, and Adrian laughed in spite of himself. "Okay," he said. "A friend is going to meet us there." "A friend?" "A new friend." "From work." "Sort of." "What's their name?" "Elena." Lena set her spoon down. "That's a girl name." "It is." "Is she your girlfriend?" Adrian nearly choked on his coffee. "What? No, she's not my girlfriend. Callie's dad has a girlfriend. She's there on weekends and she cooks meatballs." "Elena is not my girlfriend. She's a person I met at work. She wanted to say hello." "Why does she want to say hello to me? I don't work with you." He had no good answer for that. He put the coffee down and crouched next to her chair so their eyes were level. "She just wanted to meet you," he said. "That's all. If it gets boring, or if you don't like her, we can leave. Any time, you just tell me." Lena considered this with the gravity of a judge. "Okay," she said finally. "But if I don't like her, I'm going to squeeze your hand 3 times. 3 times. That's the signal. Deal." She went back to her cereal. Adrian stood up and realized his knees were aching, which they hadn't done a year ago, and he wondered briefly and distantly when he had started getting older. They walked to the coffee shop. It was only 8 blocks, and Lena liked the walk because she got to count things. Today she was counting dogs. She'd gotten to 7 by the time they reached Archer Street, and she was delighted when number 8 turned out to be a very large and very patient Bernese mountain dog being led by an elderly woman in a green coat. Dad, look at him. I see him. He's huge. He is. Can I pet him? You have to ask the lady first. She did. The woman smiled at her and said yes, and Lena buried both her small hands in the dog's fur and made a sound of pure joy that Adrian filed away to remember later. He hadn't told her before they left the apartment that he was nervous, but as they crossed 9th Street and he saw the coffee shop's warm yellow lights through the gray morning, his chest tightened a notch. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself that Elena had said she wasn't trying to be strange about it, and he believed her mostly. But believing somebody was not the same as not being afraid. She was already inside when they walked in. He spotted her at a corner table by the window, not the burgundy coat today, but a long gray one, her hair down for the first time he had seen it. She looked younger with her hair down. She was reading something on her phone, and when the bell over the door jingled, she looked up and their eyes met, and she smiled at him in a way that was neither performed nor careful. It was the smile of a woman who was glad to see a friend. He wasn't ready for that smile. He had been ready for caution. He had been ready for the cool professionalism of the apartment kitchen. He had not been ready for warmth. He felt Lena tugging on his hand. Is that her? Yeah. She's pretty. They crossed the room. Elena stood up when they reached the table, and Adrian saw her register his daughter the way people register things that matter to them. A quick, total attention that didn't last too long. You must be Lena. I am Lena. My name is really Helena, but everybody calls me Lena. Helena. Elena tried it. That's a beautiful name. I don't like it. It's too long. Fair enough. Lena, then. Lena considered her, head tilted. Are you Elena? I am. That's almost the same as Lena. It is. Maybe that's why your dad's friend is me. Adrian pulled out a chair for his daughter. Sit down, kid. You want hot chocolate? You have to order it like a grown-up. Whipped cream? You can have whipped cream. And sprinkles? The place doesn't have sprinkles. They did last time. They had them once because it was Christmas. It's almost Christmas. Elena was watching this exchange with something that looked dangerously like delight. Adrian caught her eye and she quickly controlled her face, but the corner of her mouth was still turned up. I'll go order, he said. Hot chocolate with whipped cream. Elena, coffee? Black, please. Easy. He went to the counter. The barista was new, a kid with a nose ring who didn't look like he was old enough to drink coffee, let alone serve it. Adrian ordered and paid, and then stood at the pickup end of the counter and watched his daughter, across the room, tell a stranger a story with her hands. Elena was nodding. Lena had her elbows on the table and her whole body in the telling. He thought, she hasn't made a new friend in a while. And then he thought, neither have I. He carried the drinks back. Lena was in the middle of explaining something about a classmate's birthday party. And then the clown's nose fell off and Peter screamed, but I didn't scream because I'm not afraid of clowns, even though they are weird. That's impressive, Elena said seriously. My dad's afraid of clowns. I am not, Adrian said, sitting down. You told me you were. I told you one time as a joke that I was a little weirded out by clowns. That is not the same as being afraid. You said you didn't like them. Nobody likes clowns, Lena. Elena, do you like clowns? No, Elena said. I think they are deeply unsettling. Lena nodded, satisfied. See? Adrian slid her hot chocolate toward her. She attacked the whipped cream with her tongue first, which was her ritual, and then she settled into sipping with both hands around the mug. Elena looked at him across the table. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said quietly, Thank you for bringing her. You asked. I know. Thank you anyway. He shrugged. It came out stiffer than he meant. He picked up his own coffee. They talked about small things for a while. Elena asked Lena what her favorite subject was. Lena said art, and then science, and then changed her mind and said art again. Elena asked if she had pets. Lena said she wanted a dog, but her dad said they lived in an apartment that didn't allow pets, which was a lie, because it did allow pets. But Adrian wasn't ready to take on a dog on top of everything else. He did not correct the lie. Lena noticed him not correcting the lie and gave him a smug little look over the rim of her mug. "I had a dog when I was your age," Elena said. "What was his name?" "Her name was Posy. She was a mutt. My uncle found her on the side of a road when he was driving home from work, and he brought her home, and she lived with us for 14 years. 14 years is a long time for a dog." "It is. She was a good dog." "Is she dead?" "Lena," Adrian said. "It's all right," Elena said. "Yes, she's dead. She died when I was 20. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry too. She was a nice dog." Lena nodded sagely, as if the two of them had just concluded important business, and went back to her hot chocolate. Adrian looked at Elena, and she looked at him, and something passed between them that was not the thing that had been in the kitchen of her apartment. It was quieter and easier. It was the look of two people who had just discovered they could sit at the same table without everything between them being loaded. After a while, Lena had to use the bathroom, and Adrian walked her to the back of the shop and waited outside the door. And when he came back to the table, Elena had folded her hands around her cup and was looking out the window. "She's wonderful," Elena said without turning her head. "She is. She's not shy. Not with most people. She's picky, but once she lets you in, she's in. She let me in fast." "Yeah." He sat down. "She did." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I went by the Harrogate Towers yesterday." Adrian's coffee stopped halfway to his mouth. "Elena." "I didn't go inside. I drove past. I parked across the street for about 15 minutes. I wanted to see them." He set the cup down. "You shouldn't be doing this. I told you I would. You told me you'd keep looking through the papers. That's not the same as driving to the buildings. I needed to see them." Her voice was even, but her jaw was tight. "I needed to see what we were talking about. 3 30-story towers, 400 families. My uncle's partnership invested $9 million in that project. There's a little park in the middle with a bronze plaque." "I know there is." "His name is on the plaque." Adrian closed his eyes. "I didn't know that," he said. "I didn't either until I read the paperwork. He's listed as one of the development partners, not the lead, 3rd or 4th down. But he's on it, in bronze." He opened his eyes. Lena was coming back across the shop, stopping to look at a display of cookies in a glass case. "We shouldn't be talking about this with her here." "I know. I won't say more. I just wanted you to know I went." "Did anybody see you? See me?" "See you there. Does anybody know you were looking?" She hesitated. "I had my driver take me. He's been with my uncle for 12 years. Elena. "He's discreet." "Nobody who's been with your uncle for 12 years is discreet in the way you need them to be right now." She looked at him with real surprise. For a second he thought he had overstepped, and he opened his mouth to walk it back. But then Lena was at the table, climbing back into her chair, and whatever Elena had been about to say had to wait. "Can I have a cookie?" "You just had whipped cream." "That's not a cookie." "Kid, please." "One. The small one." She beamed and slid down from her chair again. He watched her go. "I wasn't criticizing you," he said, quieter, when Lena was out of earshot. "I was warning you. If anybody on your uncle's old staff figures out what you're asking about, this gets a lot harder. Faster." "I understand." "Do you?" "Yes." Her eyes flashed, just a little. "I may not have done this before, Adrian, but I am not stupid. I know what kind of people my uncle did business with. I've been in the room with some of them. I'm being careful." "Okay." "Okay." They sat for a moment. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't mean to snap." "You didn't snap. You're scared. Fair." He made a sound that was almost a laugh. "That's generous." "It's accurate." Lena came back with a chocolate chip cookie that was twice the size he had intended. She broke it into 3 pieces without asking and handed one to him and one to Elena before she took a bite of her own. "We share cookies in this family," she announced, like a bylaw. "Thank you, Lena," Elena said. "You're welcome." Adrian took the piece she handed him and put it in his mouth and tried not to think about the fact that his daughter had just used the word family about a woman she had met 45 minutes ago. They walked Elena back to her car after. She had parked 2 blocks away and she didn't seem to be in a hurry. Lena talked the whole way about cookies and clowns and the name of a girl in her class who had moved to Oregon. Elena listened and asked good questions, the kind that only came from somebody who actually wanted to know the answers. At the car, a black sedan with tinted windows, a man in a dark coat got out of the driver's seat and opened the back door. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples, the kind of face that had seen a lot and given away almost nothing. "Good morning, ma'am." "Morning, Marcus." "Give me a second." Elena turned to Adrian and Lena. She crouched down so she was closer to Lena's height. "Thank you for sharing your cookie with me," she said. "You're welcome." "It was very good cookie. It was the biggest one in the case." "I know. I saw you pick it." Lena giggled. Elena stood up. She looked at Adrian. "Can I call you?" "My number's on file with the management office." "Give it to me directly." He hesitated for only a second. He pulled his phone out and handed it to her, and she put her number into his contacts with her own first name and no last name and handed it back. "I'll be in touch this week," she said. "All right." She got into the car. The driver closed the door. Adrian took Lena's hand and they watched the car pull out into the street and merge with the Saturday traffic. And when it was out of sight, Lena looked up at him. "Dad?" "Yeah." "I like her." "Yeah?" "She didn't do the thing." "What thing?" "The thing where people talk to me like I'm a baby. Grown-ups do that a lot. She just talked to me." Adrian looked down at his kid. He didn't know sometimes where she came from. She had Sarah's mouth and his eyes, and she had a whole personality that was her own, that neither of them had given her, that had just shown up in the world with her. "Yeah," he said. "I noticed that too." "Is she coming back?" "I don't know yet." "I hope she does." He didn't answer. They walked home. The wind had picked up, and Lena's nose was pink by the time they reached their building. He made her take a hot bath and put her in pajamas and let her watch an hour of a cartoon she liked. While she watched, he stood at the kitchen window and stared out at the alley behind his building and tried to understand what was happening. 3 weeks ago, his life had been a closed circuit. Work, Lena, sleep. He had taken comfort in how narrow it was. He had earned that narrowness. He had paid for it. Now there was a woman's phone number in his phone and a burnt junction box in a penthouse and a bronze plaque in a park he had helped to kill the truth about. His phone buzzed on the counter. "It was good to see you today. Lena is a gift." E. He stared at it for a long time before he put the phone down again. Monday morning, his supervisor called him into the management office. This was not, historically, a good sign. The management office only called people in to yell at them or fire them, and Adrian had in general avoided being called in for either reason. He washed his hands in the service bathroom, took off his cap, and went upstairs. His supervisor was a man named Ray Holbrook, no relation to the Halbrook that mattered, though Adrian had winced the first time he heard the name. Ray was 61, a former Navy mechanic, and he ran his small maintenance crew like a ship. He was gruff, but fair. He had also, over the 6 months Adrian had worked for him, stopped asking questions about Adrian's history, which Adrian appreciated more than he could say. "Cross, sit." "Morning, Ray. You did the penthouse chandelier at 47B a couple weeks ago." "Yeah." "Anything weird about the job?" Adrian kept his face still. "Weird how?" "Ms. Vale called the office this morning, said she wanted to extend you a retainer." "A what?" "A retainer. Said she had some private work at her other residences and she wanted you personally." Adrian took a breath. "What kind of private work?" "Renovation consulting. Said she needed somebody with your eye. I told her that wasn't really how we worked. She asked if we could work it out." Ray leaned back in his chair. "She offered twice your hourly rate and said she'd cover it through the building's management contract. Company gets its cut, you get twice what you get now, and you're hers 3 days a week for the foreseeable future." Adrian said nothing. "Son," Ray said, "I've been doing this a long time. I don't know who you were before you came here, and I'm not asking. But I know when a client asks for a maintenance worker by name and offers to double his rate, there's usually more going on than a bad chandelier." Adrian swallowed. "Ray, I'm not asking you to tell me." Ray held up one hand. "I'm telling you. If this lady is trouble for you, say no. I'll tell her we can't accommodate the request. If she's not trouble, then take it. Twice the rate. That means maybe you can stop picking up weekend jobs and spend some Saturdays with your kid. Adrian looked at him. She's not trouble for me, he said slowly. She's not what I need to worry about. Okay. But taking the retainer might make her trouble for somebody. Ray studied him for a long moment. That's her problem to figure out, isn't it? Yeah. So? Adrian looked at the window behind Ray. The sun had come out weakly between the clouds and the light was pale and unenthusiastic. He thought about Lena's new coat, which she would grow out of by March. He thought about the drawing on the refrigerator with the 4-window house and the gold sticker. He thought about Elena Vale standing in the kitchen of her apartment, saying, "Maybe you've been waiting for somebody to ask." "I'll take it," he said. "Thought you might." Ray pulled a piece of paper across his desk. "Sign here." Adrian signed. Jackie chat. She didn't call him for 2 days after that. When she did, it was a text at 9 at night. "Free tomorrow evening? I want to show you something." "Work tomorrow," he typed back. "Off at 4. Lena with me after 5:15, 4:30. Bring her." He stared at the screen. "Where?" "Meridian." "Bring her up when you're done. I'll send a driver for her after. She takes the bus to aftercare. I pick her up. Bring her from the bus stop. Service elevator. 47B. Marcus will meet you." He did not love it. But Lena had spent the last 2 days asking about Elena, wondering out loud when she would see her again, and he hadn't had a good answer for her. He typed, "Okay," and put the phone down and did not sleep well. Well, Lena was thrilled. He didn't tell her they were going to a fancy building. He told her they were going to see a friend after school and that there might be snacks and that she needed to be polite. She accepted this with the complete trust of a 6-year-old who had not yet learned to suspect her father of strategic vagueness. They rode the service elevator up. Lena was fascinated by the fact that the elevator buttons had numbers on both sides and that the floor was metal and rang when she jumped on it. She jumped on it 4 times before Adrian gently reminded her not to. Marcus, the driver, was waiting in the hallway outside 47B. He nodded at Adrian, crouched briefly to Lena's eye level. "You must be Helena." "Lena." "Sorry." "Lena, I'm Marcus. I'm a friend of Miss Elena's. She'll be right out." "Are you a spy?" "Excuse me?" "You have a black coat and sunglasses and you drove a black car. You look like a spy." Marcus, who had worn a dark coat and dark glasses for 11 years without a single person commenting on it, looked genuinely taken aback. "I'm a driver, miss." "That's what a spy would say." Adrian pressed his hand over his mouth to keep from laughing. Elena appeared in the doorway. She was in jeans tonight and a cream sweater, and her hair was loose. She looked like a completely different woman from the one he had first met in the burgundy coat. "Hi, come in." "Hi," Lena said, and breezed past her into the apartment like she owned it. Adrian followed more slowly. He caught Marcus's eye as he passed, and Marcus gave him a look that was not quite a smile but was close to one. The apartment had been tidied. Not that it had been messy before, but the office area had been closed off behind a set of pocket doors he hadn't realized existed, and there was a plate of cut apples and cheese on the kitchen island that looked specifically calibrated for a 6-year-old's interest. "Sit, help yourself," Elena said to Lena. Then to Adrian, "Can I steal you for 2 minutes? I want to show you something before we hang out." "Sure." She led him down a hallway he hadn't been down before. There were 3 doors. She opened the second one. It was a small room. It might have been intended as a guest bedroom. Now it was an office. A table had been set up along one wall with a large architect's lamp clamped to the edge. On the table were papers, a lot of papers. They were organized in piles, carefully, with sticky notes on top of each pile in handwriting that was clean and economical. "This is what I've been doing for the last week," she said. Adrian stepped into the room. He didn't need to ask what the papers were. He could see from the doorway. Contracts, blueprints, correspondence. Some of the papers were yellowed with age and some were crisp printouts. He walked closer to the table. The pile nearest to him had a sticky note that said, Halbrook, Core ER, 2017 to 2020. "How much of this is there?" "Across all categories, in all rooms of my uncle's files, maybe 600 pages are relevant to Harrogate or its immediate predecessors. I have about 180 in front of me, The rest I haven't reached yet. You've been doing this alone. I don't trust the archivist with this. They're going through everything else. This, I'm keeping separate. He picked up the top page of the Hallbrook pile. He read the first 2 lines and put it back down. Jesus. I know. Elena, I know. He turned to face her. She was standing with her arms crossed, the way somebody stands when they are holding something heavy and don't want anybody to see. Your uncle knew, he said, past any doubt. He knew about the shortcuts. He knew before they approved the design changes. I know. He knew before I talked to the journalist. He knew while I was being walked out of the building. Yes. He's the one who called Hallbrook. I can't prove that from what I have, but I think so, yes. Adrian leaned both his hands on the edge of the table. His head felt strange. Not dizzy, exactly. Heavy. 6 years ago, when he had been trying to understand why no one in the industry would return his calls, he had guessed that somebody powerful had made some phone calls. He had never known who. He had let himself imagine it was one specific person. It had been easier to hate one person. It was, he was realizing now, usually always more people than that. I'm sorry, Elena said quietly. It's not your fault. He was my family. It's still not your fault. She didn't answer. He turned and looked at her. Her jaw was set and her eyes were shining and she was not going to cry. He could see that because he knew that particular effort. He had used it himself. But she was close to it. Elena, I keep thinking, she said, and her voice didn't break, but it was thin, that he held me when my parents died. He was at every graduation. He sat in the front row at my college commencement, and he cried. And the whole time, somewhere in him, there was a man who could do this. People are more than one thing. That's a generous way to put it. It's also true. She looked at him. How are you doing this? She said. Doing what? Standing there, in a room full of proof that a man ruined your life and bought his silence. How are you not yelling? How are you not breaking things? Adrian opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at the paper piles and he looked at the light coming through the small window and he thought about it. Because my daughter is in your kitchen, he said finally, eating apples. And because if I start breaking things now, I'm not going to stop and I can't afford that. I couldn't 6 years ago and I can't today. Elena nodded. She looked down at the floor. Okay, she said. Okay. I'm going to keep going through this. I'm going to be very slow and very careful. I'm going to build a file that nobody can poke holes in. And when it's ready, I'm going to bring it to a very specific lawyer I know, and I'm going to let her tell me what our options are. Our options. I'm not doing this without you, Adrian. Whatever we decide to do with this, we decide together. I promised. You're the one with the company. It's your name on the building. You should be deciding. I'm the one who inherited the damage. You're the one who was damaged. It's your call. He was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? He said. Me personally? You personally. She took a breath. I want to burn it down, she said. I want every person involved in this to have to answer for it publicly. I want the Dispatch to run a front-page retraction of whatever tiny notice they printed. I want your name in the paper the right way this time. That's ambitious. I'm 31 years old, Adrian. I just inherited a company worth $400 million. Nobody respects me yet. I have exactly one shot at using this position for something that matters before the board, and the shareholders grind me down into a nice little figurehead. I want to use it. He laughed, a short surprise sound. What? You just sounded like somebody I used to know. Who? Myself, at 26. She looked at him, and then she smiled, and this smile was different from any smile he had seen on her before. It was tired and determined, and a little sad. Then help me, she said. I can't be on the record. If this thing goes public with my name on it, my daughter, I know. I'm not going to put you on the record unless you want to be, but I need you in the room. I need you looking at these papers with me. You know what they mean? I mostly don't. I need your eye. He looked at the Hallbrook pile again. A long time ago, he had been good at this. He had been good at reading contracts and finding the word that mattered. He had been good at looking at a blueprint and seeing what somebody had tried to hide. He had been told more than once by senior partners at Mercer and Hallbrook that his head was better than his hands, and he had been proud of that in a way that was probably part of what had made him reckless enough to talk to a journalist. He had not used that part of his brain in 6 years. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Okay?" She let out a breath he hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Not yet." They went back out to the kitchen. Lena had arranged the apple slices into a shape that might have been a flower or might have been a sunburst. She had put a piece of cheese in the middle, like a yolk. "Look at this," she said to Elena. "Lena, that's beautiful." "It's a flower." "I can see that." "The cheese is the middle." "I can see that too." "Dad, do you see?" "I see, baby. Can I eat it now?" "Eat it." She started dismantling her flower. Adrian leaned on the island and watched her and felt the room around him settling back into something manageable. Elena came and stood beside him. She didn't say anything for a minute. Then, quietly, where Lena couldn't hear, she said, "I have a confession." "What?" "I had my assistant pull your old employment file from Mercer and Halbrook. It wasn't hard. They had a data breach 3 years ago, and a lot of their personnel records are on a database my company subscribed to for compliance purposes." "Okay?" "You had 2 performance reviews on file before the firing." "Yeah. Both of them described you as, and I'm quoting, unusually talented, stubborn to a fault, and one of them said, likely to make a great designer if he survived his own conscience." Adrian blinked. "Who wrote that?" "Eleanor Shaw. She was your direct supervisor for about 18 months. "Yeah, I remember her. She's retired now. She lives in New Mexico. I'm thinking about calling her." "Don't." "I won't, not without checking with you." "Don't call her, Elena. She has nothing to do with this, and she tried to help me at the time, and she'll think it's her fault if she finds out it didn't work." "Okay, I won't." Lena held up a piece of apple. "This one's the last one. Who wants it?" "You eat it," Adrian said. "I already had the most." "It's your flower. It's also Elena's flower. She should have the last one." "Lena, it's okay," Elena said. "Thank you, Lena." She took the apple and ate it, and Lena nodded, satisfied, and went looking for a napkin to wipe her fingers on. Adrian and Elena stood beside each other and watched his daughter, and neither of them said anything, and after a long moment Elena's shoulder brushed against his. Once, briefly, the way a shoulder brushes against another shoulder when 2 people are standing very close and one of them has moved the slightest bit. Neither of them moved away. Bran. He thought about that later, driving home through streets that had started to catch a light snow. Lena was in the back seat, strapped into the old booster he kept there, her face turned to the window, watching the flakes come down in the orange streetlights. The radio was off. She was humming to herself. The moment in the kitchen hadn't been anything. Adrian told himself that. A shoulder had touched a shoulder. People who stood next to each other touched sometimes. It meant nothing. But he had not let anybody touch him in any accidental or friendly way in 6 years. Not really. Sarah had stopped, then left. His mother lived 3 states away, and he saw her twice a year and hugged her exactly twice each time, hello and goodbye. Ray clapped him on the back sometimes. Lena climbed on him like a tree. That was all. He had not understood how much he had been walking around as a man made out of glass. Not just careful not to break anything, but careful not to be touched, for fear he would. A shoulder. He made himself stop thinking about it. He focused on the road. The snow was light, but the streets were getting slick, and he had precious cargo. In the back seat, Lena sighed. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby." "Is Elena going to come to our house sometime?" He opened his mouth to say something vague, and then he closed it. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe. I want her to." "Yeah?" "She listens." "She does, doesn't she?" "Not a lot of grown-ups listen." "No." "You listen." "Thanks, kid." "But you're my dad. You have to listen." "That's not true." "It is. It's your job." He laughed, low in his chest, and she went back to humming. By the time they got home, the snow had thickened into something real. He carried her up the stairs even though she was getting too big to carry because she had fallen asleep against the window on the last 3 blocks, and he didn't have the heart to wake her. At the top of the stairs, she stirred and mumbled something, and he said, "It's okay, baby. We're home." and she put her face against his shoulder and went back to sleep. He put her to bed without a bath. He would let her skip it tonight. When she was tucked in, he stood in her doorway for a while, watching her breathe. In the kitchen, his phone buzzed. Drive safe. E. He looked at it for a long time. He typed back, already home, and then he deleted it, and then he typed it again, and then he deleted it again. In the end, he sent, home. She fell asleep in the car. The reply came almost instantly. Good. Thank you for tonight. I'm sorry I kept you. He looked at the screen. You didn't. He put the phone down and stood at the window and watched the snow come down on the alley. The streetlight at the mouth of the alley was flickering, which was a maintenance issue somebody should see to, but it wasn't his building and it wasn't his problem. He watched the light flicker on and off and thought about a woman standing next to him in a kitchen, not saying anything, not moving away. He thought about his daughter, asleep in the next room, telling him earnestly that Elena listened. He thought about a pile of papers in a small room, Hallbrook Correspondence 2017 to 2020. He thought about a bronze plaque in a park he had never been to. For the first time in a long time, he did not want to sleep. He wanted to sit at a table and read paper. He wanted to remember the man he had been at 26, the one Eleanor Shaw had described as likely to become great if he survived his own conscience. He had not survived it, not in the way she meant. He had buried it alive and walked around on top of it for 6 years. But something was moving now. Something underground. He made himself a cup of coffee, even though it was late, and he sat down at the oak kitchen table he had bought at an estate sale. And he opened a notebook he had not opened in 4 years, and he started very carefully to write down everything he could remember about the original Harrogate design specifications before they had been changed. He wrote until 2 in the morning. He did not know, yet, what he would do with what he remembered. But for the first time in 6 years, he remembered. He wrote for 14 nights, not every night, and not for long stretches. Some nights he only got down a paragraph before exhaustion caught up with him, and he fell asleep with his forehead on the oak table. But he kept the notebook in a drawer under the sink where Lena would not find it, and he returned to it whenever the apartment went quiet. Blueprints he had memorized in a previous life came back to him in fragments. Names of subcontractors. A specific phone call with a steel supplier in which he had been told, in terms he had understood at the time but pretended not to, that the shipment would contain what was being paid for, not what had been specified. He wrote it all down. During the days he worked, Ray kept him on a rotation of small jobs at 3 different properties, but he was at the Meridian Tower 3 days a week now, on the retainer, and Elena had carved out a schedule for him that was structured to look exactly like real consulting work. On paper, he was advising her on deferred maintenance issues across her residential portfolio. In practice, he spent his afternoons in the small office off the hallway, with the door closed and the paper piles in front of him, reading documents slower than he had ever read anything in his life. Elena was usually there. Sometimes she was at her desk in the other room, taking calls in the crisp voice she used with board members and lawyers. Sometimes she came in and sat across from him at the table and drank tea and read alongside him in silence. He found he preferred the silent afternoons. She was good company without words. There were a lot of people in the world who were good company with words, and very few who could sit quietly and not try to fill the space. On the second Thursday, she said, "I want to bring somebody in." He looked up from a contract writer dated August 2019. "Who?" "A lawyer, the one I mentioned." "What's her name?" "Patricia Yoon. She used to be at the U.S. Attorney's Office. She's in private practice now. She does white-collar work, but she also handles whistleblower cases." "She's expensive." "She's my problem." "Elena, she owes me a favor. Don't ask what for. She'll do an initial review for nothing, and if we decide to move forward, I'll pay her." "Before she sees any of this," Adrian said, "she needs to understand what she's reading. My name doesn't go on anything without my signature. If she calls me as a source or a witness, I'm done. Not metaphorically. Done." I told her all of that. "You've already talked to her." "I called her Monday. I asked her, hypothetically, how a person would handle a 6-year-old matter where the person in question had signed an NDA under duress and had made no public statement since. She said the NDA was almost certainly unenforceable on public interest grounds. But she also said no court case is a sure thing, and the client has to decide whether they can afford the risk of the other side going scorched earth. What does scorched earth mean in her mind? Her words were countersuits, financial discovery, and whatever personal material their investigators can surface. Adrian was silent for a moment. They'd go after Lena. They'd try. What does trying look like? They'd hire someone to find out what school she's in, who her teacher is, whether your custody arrangement is airtight, whether her mother could be leveraged. He felt something cold slide down through his chest. Sarah hasn't seen her in over 3 years, he said. She calls on her birthday and sends a card, sometimes. That wouldn't stop an investigator from finding her and offering her something to come back. Sarah wouldn't... He stopped. He had almost said Sarah wouldn't take it, and then he had heard himself say it, and he had realized he did not know that. He had not known what Sarah would or would not do in 6 years. She had a new husband he had never met and an address in Denver and a voice on the phone that always sounded slightly distracted, as if she were doing dishes while they talked. Adrian, I'm okay. You're not okay. I'm okay enough to keep reading. Just let me sit for a second. She didn't push. She got up and made tea for both of them without asking if he wanted any. When she set the mug down in front of him, her fingers brushed against the back of his hand, just barely. And then she was back in her chair across the table, and neither of them acknowledged that it had happened. He drank the tea. It was too hot. He drank it anyway. Okay, he said after a while. Bring in the lawyer. She reads, she doesn't take copies, she doesn't write my name down. When she's done, we decide. Deal. And Elena. Yeah. If at any point in this you think the risk to Lena is becoming concrete, not hypothetical, concrete, you tell me. You don't manage me. You don't soften it. You tell me. I promise. Okay. He went back to the contract writer. She went back to her own pile. After a minute, she said without looking up, You're scaring me a little. Why? You used to say no to this. This week you're saying yes to things. He put the pen down. I know, he said. What changed? He looked at her across the table. She was in a gray cashmere sweater and her hair was up and there was ink on the side of her hand from where she had set it on her own notes. She had never looked less like the woman in the burgundy coat and more like somebody he might have gone to school with. I remembered something, he said. What? Who I was before. And I didn't hate him as much as I thought I did. She held his eyes for a second longer than was necessary. Then she looked down. Okay, she said softly. The lawyer came on a Saturday morning. Patricia Yoon was in her mid-40s, compact, black-haired, with the kind of posture that suggested she had been told as a child to sit up straight and had never forgotten. She wore no makeup and no jewelry except a thin wedding band. She arrived at Elena's building alone, carrying a soft-sided briefcase that she did not let Marcus carry for her. And she took off her coat in the foyer and accepted a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen island with the brisk cordiality of a surgeon preparing to operate. Mr. Cross. Adrian. Patricia. Elena has told me nothing except that she has some documents she wants me to review and that you were formerly employed by a firm that is now defunct. That's all I know. You can tell me more, or you can let me read the documents and draw my own conclusions. I'd prefer to read first. Read first. Good. Elena took her back to the small office. Adrian stayed in the kitchen. He had not wanted to sit in the room while another person read those papers for the first time. He had read many of them himself by now, and he had a physical response to them. His hands would start sweating. The back of his neck would prickle. He would forget, for minutes at a time, to breathe normally. He could not watch someone else have that reaction on his behalf. Lena was at a friend's birthday party. He had dropped her off an hour ago at a house in a neighborhood of neat lawns and strollers and driveways, and he had stood in the entryway making small talk with the mother of the birthday girl, who knew him as Adrian, a nice single dad, maintenance worker, lives alone with his kid. The mother had asked him if he wanted to stay for the parent coffee. He had said, with genuine regret, that he had an appointment. She had said, of course, some other time. He had driven to the Meridian afterward, feeling as though he had just turned down a piece of a normal life that was on offer for no reason other than that he had learned a long time ago that accepting things was what got you in trouble. He sat at the island and drank coffee and stared at the kitchen tile. Patricia Yoon came back out after 2 hours and 40 minutes. Her face was the same face she had arrived with. He respected that. She sat down across from him at the island. Elena sat down beside her. Mr. Cross. Adrian. Adrian. I'm going to be direct with you because that's how I work, and because Elena tells me you prefer it. Go ahead. What I just read is a civil and potentially criminal case. It's not airtight. A lot of the most damaging documents are internal memos from a man who is now deceased, and the evidentiary rules around those are complicated. The original blueprints with the approved specifications are there. The revision memos are there. At least 3 of the memos in the Hallbrook correspondence pile reference, and I'm paraphrasing, the need to manage the situation around the junior designer, which my friends in the U.S. Attorney's Office would be very interested in seeing. There is also, in my view, a strong civil case against the surviving principals of Mercer and Hallbrook, and against 2 other firms that appear as beneficiaries in the cost savings memo. Against surviving principals. Yes, Mercer and Hallbrook dissolved in 2022, but 2 of the senior partners rolled their book into a new firm called Mercer-Riddick Partners. They're still practicing. They were both copied on the 2019 memos. Adrian nodded slowly. The fact that the Harrogate Towers have not failed structurally is a mitigating factor in the public safety part of the case, she continued, but it is not a bar to action because the substitutions that were made were still building code violations, and the certificate of occupancy was issued based on documentation that misrepresented the materials used. The buildings would need to be re-inspected. My guess is they would require remediation. That's a huge amount of money, which is exactly why the parties buried it. Okay, here's what you need to know before you decide anything. If you authorize Elena to share these documents with the right people, 3 things will happen. First, there will be a criminal investigation that will take anywhere from 18 months to 4 years. Second, there will be a civil whistleblower action that you can elect to attach yourself to, in which case you could potentially recover damages, or you can remain anonymous, in which case you cannot. Third, some portion of the people named in these documents will try to destroy you. Their most effective lever will be your daughter. I know. You need a custody order that is bulletproof. You need your ex-wife to be on record supporting your custody, or ideally, to have terminated her parental rights, which she has not. You need a financial safety net in case you lose this job and have trouble finding another one in a tight window. You need a lawyer separate from me who handles family law. I can recommend 3. Okay. I have to ask you something, Adrian, and you are not going to like the question. Ask. Is there anything in your past, other than what we have discussed, that could be used against you in a public proceeding? I'm not asking for your confession. I'm asking whether there is a thing. Drugs, a prior arrest, an affair, an unpaid debt, something that a firm of well-paid investigators given 6 months could surface and hand to a reporter. Adrian thought, I have student loans I'm behind on. I paid off the last of my credit card debt 2 years ago. I was arrested once in college for being drunk in a public park. Charges dropped. I had an affair before my marriage ended. I'm not proud of it. Sarah knows about it. There's probably a text thread somewhere. I have never used illegal drugs. I have prescription for a mild anti-anxiety medication that I fill twice a year. I drink maybe 4 beers a week. I've never been fired from a job that wasn't the one we're discussing. I pay my taxes. Patricia made a note. Who was the affair with? A coworker. At the firm. Before Lena was born. Sarah found out in the middle of everything else, which didn't help. The woman's name. Elena's hearing this. Elena's hearing all of this. That's the deal. You want a lawyer? She hears it. He glanced at Elena. She was looking at the counter. She did not look surprised. She did not look upset. She looked the way a person looks when they are keeping themselves from having a visible reaction to information they are processing. Her name was Maya Richter. She moved to Seattle in 2021. We haven't spoken since 2018. Is she married? I have no idea. All right, that's manageable. What about your ex-wife? What about her? Tell me about her. Sarah Cross. Sarah Bennett. Now, she remarried. She lives in Denver with a man named Greg Bennett, who I've never met. They have a child together, I think. A boy. Lena knows about him because Sarah sent a picture last Christmas. Sarah was a teacher when we were married. I don't know what she does now. Our custody arrangement is informal. She waived her visitation rights in writing when Lena was 3, because she said she didn't want to confuse Lena with visits that she couldn't commit to. We never went to court because we couldn't afford it. No court order? No court order, Patricia sighed through her nose. That's a problem. I know it's a problem. You need to fix it. Today's the day you fix it, before anything else moves. I'm going to give you a name. Okay. She wrote a name and a phone number on a square of Elena's notepaper and slid it across to him. Call her Monday. Tell her I sent you. Tell her the facts I just heard and tell her we have a window of maybe 2 weeks before this matter gets more visible. She can get a consent order done in that time if your ex-wife cooperates. If she doesn't. If she doesn't, it's going to take longer and cost more. Okay. Now the other question, do you want to pursue this or not? Adrian looked at his hands on the counter. He looked at Elena. She was watching him now, her expression careful. I need to think, he said. That's fair, Patricia said. I'll keep everything I've read confidential under attorney-client privilege. Elena has retained me as of this morning. You have time to decide, but Adrian, I'll tell you something not as a lawyer. Okay? Statutes of limitations are running. The federal ones in this specific kind of case are tricky because the concealment of the original fraud can toll the clock. But we are not in a situation where we can afford to wait a year for you to be ready. If you decide no, I'll respect that, and the documents will go back into Elena's safe, and nobody will hear about any of this. If you decide yes, we need to start moving within 30 days. Understood. One last thing. Yeah, the man I'm told raised Elena is named in these papers as having facilitated the cover-up. She's told me she's aware of that. I want you to know that the person I met in that study room today is handling a very difficult personal fact with more clarity than most of my clients manage in similar positions. That's for whatever it's worth to you. Adrian looked at Elena. She was staring at her coffee. It's worth something, he said. Patricia stood up. I have to go. I'm meeting my son at his hockey game at noon. I'll send you both an email later with next steps. Elena, thank you for the coffee. Adrian, it was good to meet you. You too. She shook his hand firmly, and then Elena walked her to the door. Adrian stayed at the island. He was aware of the blood in his ears. When Elena came back, she sat down on the stool Patricia had vacated and did not speak. After a long minute, he said, I should have told you about Maya before you heard it in front of a lawyer. You didn't owe me that. I know. I'm not your wife, Adrian. I know. There was a silence. I had a fiancé 2 years ago, she said. 3-year relationship. He was the COO of a hedge fund. My uncle hated him. When the engagement broke off, my uncle took me to dinner and said, and I quote, "Thank the stars you came to your senses." I don't remember the last time he had told me he loved me, but he said that because the man was beneath the family. That's the sort of thing he thought about. Why did it break off? Because he asked me 3 weeks before the wedding whether I would consider giving the company to a board after my uncle died. He said I wasn't suited for it. He said I would be happier with a foundation. Jesus. So I gave him the ring back. Good. I tell you this, she said, looking up, because I think you should know that when Patricia asked you that question and you answered it honestly, it did not make me think less of you. It made me think something else, actually. I don't want to say what yet. He looked at her. They were quiet for a long time. Then Lena's name came up on his phone, because it was the alarm he had set to remind himself when to leave to pick her up from the birthday party, and the spell, whatever it was, broke. He called Sarah that night. He sat on the couch with the TV off and his phone in his hand for 20 minutes before he dialed. Lena was in the bath, banging on the tile with a rubber duck. Her laughter came through the door in peals. Sarah picked up on the 4th ring. Adrian. Hey, Sarah, you got a minute? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Lena's fine. She's in the tub. Oh, okay. Give me a second. He heard her move through a house. A door closed. He heard her breath change when she sat down somewhere. Okay, she said. What's going on? I need to ask you for something. Okay. I need you to sign a consent to a formal custody order. Full physical and legal custody to me. Your visitation rights as you already outlined them in the letter you sent in 2022, which we'd make binding. I'd keep the door open the way we've always kept it. Phone, video calls, birthdays, summer, if you ever want to. Nothing changes in practice. It's just on paper. Sarah didn't say anything for a moment. Why now? She said. Something's come up at work. A situation. I can't explain it in detail over the phone, but I might need to be in a position where I can prove on paper that Lena is legally mine and that you have agreed to that before Christmas. Are you in trouble? I'm not in trouble. I'm trying to stay out of trouble. Adrian? Sarah, this is not about me being reckless. This is the opposite of reckless. This is me, for once, getting out in front of something before it hits me. There was a silence. Does this have to do with Harrogate? He closed his eyes. Yeah. I thought that was over. It wasn't. It's never been over. It just went quiet. She exhaled. I always thought, she said, that someday you were going to do something about it. Would you have stayed if I had? I don't know. That's a better answer than I expected. I've had a lot of time to think, Adrian. I was not a good wife to you at the end. I ran out of ways to stay patient. I made it about myself when it shouldn't have been. You don't have to do this. I'm not apologizing. I'm explaining. I am happy now. I have a life. I have Wyatt. I love Greg. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't the right thing for me to leave. But I've also had 6 years to look at our marriage from a distance, and I know I did some things I'd do different, and one of them was what I said to you at the end. I shouldn't have called you the man on the couch. He pressed his forehead against his hand. I deserve some of it. You deserve some of it, not all of it. Okay. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. I don't want anything from you. You can have full custody. I should have signed it years ago. Send me the papers. I'll get them notarized here. If you need me to say it on a recorded call, I'll say it on a recorded call. Thank you, Sarah. Don't thank me. Send me a picture of her when you get a chance. I haven't seen one since October. I'll send you one tonight. And Adrian, yeah, whatever you're about to do, be careful. Those people 6 years ago, I remember what they did to you. I remember the look on your face. Don't underestimate them. I won't. Until Lena, her mother, says she loves her. He swallowed. Yeah, he said. I'll tell her. They hung up. He put the phone down on the coffee table and stared at it. Lena came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel with her hair dripping. Dad, I need pajamas. They're on your bed. Thank you. She padded off down the hall, leaving wet footprints on the wood. He sat there for a minute, then he stood up and went and took a picture of her in her yellow pajamas holding her stuffed elephant, and he sent it to Sarah, and a minute later Sarah wrote back, "She looks so much like you." He read that 5 times before he put the phone down. Motet. The family lawyer, a woman named Teresa Mallory, was everything Patricia had said she would be. She was brisk, efficient, expensive, and she had a consent order drafted within a week. Sarah signed it in Colorado the following Thursday and overnighted the notarized copies back. By the end of November, Adrian Cross was, on paper, the sole legal custodian of Helena Ruth Cross, 6 years old, and he had an order in a drawer that no private investigator in the world could poke a hole in. It cost him money he did not have. Elena paid for it, through a quiet arrangement that she insisted was a legal retainer and he insisted was a loan. He signed a piece of paper saying he would repay it within 5 years. She put the paper in a drawer without reading it and changed the subject. On the 1st of December, on the same day he received the notarized consent order back from Colorado, he drove to the Meridian Tower and went up to 47B, and when Elena opened the door, he handed her the envelope without saying anything, and she read the first page and nodded and put it down and looked up at him. Okay, she said. So what do we do? We do it. You're sure? I'm not sure, but I'm doing it anyway. She studied him. Why? A lot of reasons. The one that matters is that in 12 years, Lena is going to be old enough to understand what kind of man her father was, and I'd like for her to find out he was the kind who didn't let it go forever. Okay. Call Patricia. I'll call Patricia. He turned to leave. Adrian. He stopped at the door. What? I'm proud of you. He looked at her over his shoulder. Don't be yet, he said. Why not? Because I haven't done anything yet. I just said I would. Ask me in 6 months whether you're still proud. She smiled, that particular smile that was tired and determined and a little sad. Fine, she said. I'll ask you in 6 months. Ot. Patricia moved fast after that. She filed a sealed submission to the relevant U.S. Attorney's Office the following Monday. She had already had preliminary conversations with two former colleagues there, and the submission was received not as a surprise, but as a documented version of a problem they had apparently been circling from a different angle for several months. That part Adrian did not find out about until much later, and when he did, he felt a strange and quiet vindication. Daniel Park's widow, it turned out, had kept records, and someone in that office had been trying for 2 years to build a case that lacked a cooperating witness. Now it had more than a witness. It had 600 pages of original documentation from inside the Vail organization. The first week of December was the calmest week Adrian had had in a year. He worked. He picked up Lena. He made dinner. He helped her decorate construction paper snowflakes for her classroom door. At night, after she slept, he and Elena had phone calls that lasted 40 minutes, an hour. They talked about nothing in particular. Once he fell asleep on the couch with the phone on his chest, and when he woke up, the call was still connected, and she was still on the line, quietly reading a book in her apartment 8 blocks away. And he said her name softly, and she said, "You fell asleep. It's fine. I stayed on in case you needed anything." And he did not know what to do with that information, so he did not say anything. It was the calm before something, and he knew it. He tried to stay in it anyway. On the 5th, Elena came to his apartment for the first time. She had asked, after weeks of saying she wouldn't ask, if she could see where he lived. He had looked around at the mismatched furniture and the water stain in the kitchen ceiling, and he had almost said no. Then he had said yes, because Lena had been hovering within earshot and had said, "She can come, Dad, it's fine," with the authority of a small woman who had already adopted Elena and would brook no further discussion. Elena brought a container of soup and a box of cookies from a bakery Adrian could not have afforded. She sat on his free couch and she ate soup out of a bowl with a crack in it, and she listened to Lena read a chapter book aloud. She did not make any comment about the apartment. She did not say it was charming or cozy or any of the words that privileged people used to describe places like his apartment. She just sat there, in her jeans and sweater, and she was there. And when Lena asked her if she wanted to see the drawing that had won the gold sticker, Elena said, "I would love to." After Lena was in bed, they stood in his kitchen washing the dishes together. He washed, she dried, because he did not own a dish towel long enough for her to wash without splashing. "Adrian." "Yeah." "I need to tell you something." He set a plate down in the rack. "What?" "Patricia called me this afternoon. She said the office has moved faster than she expected. She said by next Monday at the latest, there are going to be subpoenas issued. Some of them are going to be to people who are either still on my company's board or who are connected to people still on my board." He picked up the plate again and rewashed it for no reason. "Okay. When those subpoenas land, the people on my board are going to figure out very quickly that I have been cooperating with the government. They're going to connect it to the file in my uncle's safe. Somebody on that board is going to try to remove me." "They can do that." "They can try. I own 36% of the voting shares directly, and I have proxies from 2 of the other major shareholders. They would need a coalition to move me out. It would get ugly." "How ugly?" "Public ugly, press ugly, shareholder letters, emergency meetings, maybe a proxy fight." "Jesus." "My name is going to be in the paper. Probably my uncle's name, too, which I've made my peace with." "Your name. Not your current one. Your full one." Adrian set the plate down. "How?" "They'll leak it. Not our side, theirs. As soon as they figure out who the cooperating witness is, they'll put your name out there to try to discredit you before the case is built. Patricia warned me it would happen. She said we should be ready." "Lena." "Yes." He gripped the edge of the sink. "What's the plan?" "Patricia's drafted a statement under your name that goes out the same day. It preempts them. It tells your side before they can tell theirs. We have a reporter at the Tribune who has been vetted and who will take the story with a full factual file backing it. Not the Dispatch this time. Someone senior. Someone they can't call and kill the story." "Patricia is sure." "Patricia is sure." He exhaled. His hands were wet and cold. "When?" "As early as this coming Monday. As late as Thursday." "That's 4 days." "Yes. 4 days until my name is back in the paper." "Yes." He closed his eyes. Elena put the dish towel down. She did not touch him. She just stood beside him. "Adrian." "I'm okay." "Okay." "Give me a second." "Take as many as you want." He took about a minute and a half. He listened to the refrigerator hum and the radiator tick and Lena's small snoring through her bedroom door. Okay, he said. I need to tell her something. Lena? Before Monday, she's going to hear things at school. Kids are going to hear their parents talking. I need to tell her a version of this before somebody else does. Okay. What are you going to tell her? I'm going to tell her that a long time ago Daddy did something brave that didn't work out, and that now some people are helping me make it work out after all, and that there might be some news stories with Daddy's name in them that other kids' parents might talk about. Will she understand that? Most of it. She won't understand all of it. She'll ask questions for a year. I'd rather her ask me questions than hear it in the cafeteria. Okay? He opened his eyes. Elena was standing very close to him, and he had not noticed her move. I need you to do something for me, she said. What? I need you to let me be there when you tell her. He stared at her. Elena, I know that's a lot. I know I don't have a place in that particular conversation, but I'm asking because I'm about to be part of something very public that she's also going to hear about, and I don't want her to hear my name in those stories and not know that I'm on her side. I want her to see me with you when you tell her, so she knows. He looked at her for a long moment. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow after school. Come here. I'll tell her with you in the room. She nodded. Okay. Okay. They stood there. The kitchen light was the only light on in the apartment. Her hair was slightly damp from the humidity of the dishes. She had a tired smudge under her left eye. He did a thing he had not planned to do and did not entirely understand himself doing. He lifted his hand and put it, briefly, against the side of her face. His fingers were wet from the sink. He did not kiss her. He did not try. He just touched her there, for maybe 2 seconds, and then he took his hand away and went back to washing the next dish. She did not speak for a long moment. Okay, she said, finally, her voice a little thicker than before. Okay. I'm going to go home. Okay. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. She let herself out. He heard the door close. He heard the elevator motor start in the hall. He stood in his kitchen with his hands in the sink for a long time. The next afternoon, sitting on the rug in Lena's bedroom with Elena beside him and Lena in his lap, he told his daughter a careful, child-sized version of what was coming. He said that a long time ago, when she was a baby, some people had lied about something important, and Daddy had tried to tell the truth, and it had cost him a job and some friends, and that now some new people were helping him make the truth known. He said there might be people on television or in the newspaper talking about it, and that her teacher might know, and that some kids might hear about it. Lena listened with her eyes very wide. Did you do something bad, Dad? No, baby. I did something that turned out to be hard. Not bad. But they said you did something bad. They did. That's not fair. No. Why did they say that? Because they were scared, and because they were trying to hide what they did. And now they can't hide it anymore. That's the idea. She thought about this for a very long time, the way 6-year-olds do when they are trying to fit a big piece of the world into their small understanding of how it works. Dad? Yeah. Are you going to get in trouble? I don't think so. Are you going to have to go somewhere? No. Are you going to go to jail? No, Lena, I promise. I'm not going to jail. She turned her face into his shoulder. Okay. Elena, on his other side, was quiet the whole time. She did not interrupt. She did not try to add anything. She sat there and held her knees and listened, and when Lena turned her face into his shoulder, Elena reached out and put her hand gently on the small of Lena's back, not to comfort her, just to let her know she was still there. Lena let it be. She did not shake her off. After a minute, she reached back with one hand and found Elena's hand and held on to it. She did not speak. She just held on. Adrian looked over the top of his daughter's head at Elena Vale, and he saw that she was crying soundlessly, and he realized that at some point, without his quite noticing when, he had let go of the last piece of his conviction that he was going to face what was coming alone. Outside, the short December afternoon had already started to fade, and the streetlights were humming on across the city one by one. And somewhere in a lawyer's office across town, a stack of subpoenas was being checked for accuracy before being handed to a courier. And somewhere in a boardroom, a man who had not yet been named was about to have a very bad week. And somewhere, Adrian thought, Daniel Park's widow was sitting down to dinner, not knowing yet that a thing she had started to set in motion 6 years ago was finally going to move. He pulled his daughter closer. Elena's fingers stayed wrapped in Lena's. "We're going to be okay," he said, out loud to both of them, or maybe to himself. Lena nodded against his shoulder, a small nod, with the complete trust of a child who had decided, for reasons she did not have words for yet, to believe him. The subpoenas went out on a Tuesday, not a Monday. That one-day delay gave Adrian the strangest gift of his adult life. An extra 24 hours in which nothing was yet public, and in which he walked his daughter to school in the cold, and in which the world still thought he was nobody in particular. He used those 24 hours to do laundry, pack a small bag for Lena in case they had to stay somewhere other than their apartment, and call his mother in Michigan. He told her a short version of what was coming. She was quiet for a long time on the phone. Then she said, "Your father would be proud of you, and I am too. And I'm going to try not to say anything else because if I do, I am going to start crying, and I would rather save that for after I hang up." He loved her very much in that moment, and he told her so, which was a thing he had not said to her on the phone in about 4 years. The story broke on Wednesday morning. The Tribune ran it on the front of the Metro section, above the fold, under the byline of a reporter named Carla Estrada, whom Adrian had never met, and who had spent, he would later learn, 3 weeks corroborating every single document in the file Patricia had walked her through. The headline used his full name. Adrian Matthew Crossford, Harrogate whistleblower, breaks 6-year silence as federal probe expands. He read it standing in his kitchen at 6 in the morning with his phone in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. Lena was still asleep. The apartment was dark except for the stove light. He read the whole article twice because the first time he could not process any of it, and the second time his hands began to shake so hard he had to set the coffee down. It was accurate. That was what undid him. In his entire adult life, no public statement about him had been accurate, and now one was. Carla Estrada had done the work. The word whistleblower appeared in the first paragraph, not the last. Daniel Park was named, with his widow's cooperation, as the engineer who had first flagged the structural substitutions. Edward Vail was named. Martin Halbrook was named. Mercer Riddick Partners was named. The sentence that made Adrian put down the coffee was near the end. Crossford, now 32, works in residential maintenance in the city. He has raised his 6-year-old daughter alone. He sat down on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinets, and he put his face in his hands, and he did not cry, exactly, but he made a sound that he was glad nobody was awake to hear. His phone started ringing at 6:14. He did not answer it. Patricia had told him not to. She had given him a number to forward everything to, and a second number, a burner, for people he actually wanted to talk to. The burner had exactly 7 numbers in it. Elena, his mother, Ray, Sarah, Patricia, Teresa the family lawyer, and Lena's school. Everyone else could leave a message with a woman named Denise at Patricia's firm. Elena called the burner at 6:20. "Did you see it?" "I saw it." "Are you okay?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in a few hours." "The board is convening at 9. Today?" "Today. They're trying to get ahead of it. My chairman called me at 5. He wants me out by end of week." "Can he do that?" "He can try." "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. Take care of Lena. I'll call you after the meeting." "Elena." "Yes." "Be careful in that room." "I will. I mean it. Somebody in that room gave the memo to Halbrook's people 6 years ago. Somebody in that room might still be playing for the other side." "I know. I'll be careful. Call me the second it's over." "I will." He hung up. He stayed on the floor for another minute. Then he got up, made Lena's lunch, made her breakfast, woke her, dressed her in her red coat and her warmest hat, and walked her to school. She held his hand the entire way and did not say very much. At the door of her classroom, he knelt down and she looked at him with those serious dark eyes and said, "Is today the day the news is in the newspaper?" "Today's the day, baby." "Are kids going to say stuff?" "Maybe. If they do, you remember what we said. You come tell your teacher, and you come tell me." "Okay? I love you." "I love you too." She walked into her classroom without looking back, which was a thing she had started doing only this year, and which broke his heart a little every time. He walked back to his apartment through streets that felt the same as they had yesterday and were not the same at all. A woman at the bus stop was reading the metro section on her phone. A man at the corner was talking into his earpiece and said the word Harrogate just as Adrian passed. Adrian pulled his collar up and kept walking. Nobody looked at him. He had lived in this neighborhood for 3 years and nobody knew his face. The hours crawled. He tried to work on the notebook, but he could not concentrate. At 9 o'clock, he sat at the kitchen table and stared at his phone. At 9:40, Elena texted him. Still in the meeting, holding. At 10:30, they're voting now. At 11:02, I kept my seat, 6 to 5, going to call in a few hours. It's not over. At 11:03, he stood up, walked to the refrigerator, took down the drawing of a 4-window house with a gold sticker on it, and pressed his thumb against the paper for a long moment. Then he put it back. She came to his apartment that night. She let herself in with the key he had given her a week ago, and which she had not used yet. She looked like a woman who had been in a room with hostile people for 12 hours. Her hair was coming out of its knot, and her eyes were bloodshot, and there was coffee on the cuff of her blouse. Lena was already asleep. It was just past 9. Elena sat down on his couch and did not take her coat off. Tell me, he said. It was ugly. How ugly? The chairman, Henrik Danzig, he's been on the board since before I was born. He called the meeting to order and then, before any business, he read a statement he had prepared. He called the Tribune story a reckless attack on the memory of a good man. He said that I had been cooperating with a federal probe without the board's knowledge, which is true, and that I had been using company resources to do it, which is not true, because I used my uncle's personal files that he left me in his will. He called for a vote of no confidence, and 6 members voted to remove me, 5 voted to keep me. I had the chairman on the wrong side of the math, which he did not expect. He has spent 30 years in rooms where his count was always right. His count was not right today. Who were the 5? 3 I expected, 2 I didn't. One of the 2 is a woman named Ingrid Varga, who I've been on the board with for 6 months and who I frankly thought hated me. She has a civil engineering background, which I didn't know when I took her call yesterday. She read the Tribune piece at 4 in the morning and called me at 5:30. She said, and I'm quoting, if my Uncle Edward signed off on what that article describes, then he was worse than I thought, and I have thought about it for 2 days, and I am voting with you. Huh. Yeah. Huh. And the other one? A man named Ronaldo Baez. I honestly have no idea why he voted with me. He's never said 2 words to me in 6 months. He voted, and then he left the room without making eye contact. So you're still the CEO. For now, they'll come back at me. This was round 1. Okay. Adrian. Yeah. 20 minutes after the vote, the chairman resigned in the meeting. He said he was not going to serve under a CEO who was, his phrase, willing to crucify her family in public for personal attention. He walked out. Jesus. I'm not done. Go. The story goes that the chairman's son-in-law is on the board of Mercer Riddick Partners. Ingrid told me afterwards in the hallway that she'd been hearing for a year that Danzig's son-in-law was personally exposed if the Harrogate thing ever came back. So he had a reason to want you out that had nothing to do with the family's honor. He had a reason. And I think he might have been the one who called Halbrook 6 years ago, not my uncle. Or at least, he was the one who made sure the right people knew what my uncle was not stopping. Adrian sat down in the chair across from her. Elena, I know. Elena, your uncle might not have been the one who personally orchestrated it? No. Might still have known and allowed it. I know. I'm not letting him off. But it's a different ugly, and I need to sit with it for a while before I know what to do with it. Okay? Patricia says Danzig's resignation is a tell. He would not have walked out of the room unless he knew that subpoenas were coming for him personally. She thinks by the end of next week he's going to be named. Okay. Okay. He looked at her. She looked absolutely wrecked. She was sitting on his couch with her knees together and her hands in her lap like a kid waiting outside a principal's office. Have you eaten today? He said. I had a granola bar at 2. Jesus, Elena. I know. Take your coat off. I'll make you something. I'm not hungry. I'm making you something. He made scrambled eggs and toast because that was what was in his kitchen at 9 in the evening. He cut up an apple. He poured her a glass of the cheap red wine he kept for himself, 1 glass a week on Saturdays. He set the plate down on the coffee table, and she looked at it for a long moment before she picked up the fork. She ate slowly. He sat on the other end of the couch with his own glass of wine. The television was off. A radiator ticked. Danzig's resignation is going to be public tomorrow, she said between bites. Patricia thinks the board might flip within a month. Good. Adrian? Yeah. I lost a lot today. I know. He was my family. Whatever he was or wasn't, he was my family. I'm going to have to bury him all over again. He set his glass down. He moved across the couch until he was beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders, carefully, the way you put an arm around someone who might shatter. She leaned against him. They sat like that for a long time. The wine got warm, the eggs got cold. Neither of them moved. After a while, she said, Adrian. Yeah. I didn't tell you. At the end of the meeting today, after Danzig walked out, one of the older members said something to me. What? She said, and this is a direct quote, "It's a shame because your uncle really did love you. It was the only thing in his life he did right." Adrian did not say anything. He rested his chin lightly on the top of her head. I think he did love me, Elena said, very quietly. I think he also did terrible things. I don't know how to hold both of those at once. You don't have to figure out how to hold them tonight. I know. Eat your eggs. She almost laughed. She picked up the fork again. The house phone, the one Patricia had set up, was ringing itself out for 3 straight days. Reporters. A woman from a television network in New York. A producer from a national podcast. The New York lawyer for a victims group that had formed around unsafe housing projects and who wanted Adrian to come speak. Patricia's assistant, Denise, fielded all of them and sent Adrian a nightly summary. He read the summaries. He did not return any calls. He did, on Friday, take one call. Eleanor Shaw, his old supervisor. Now 69 years old, retired to Santa Fe, widowed. He had asked Elena weeks ago not to call her, and she had not. Eleanor had called him. She had found his burner number through Patricia's office because Patricia had decided correctly that Eleanor was a call Adrian would want to take. Adrian. Ms. Shaw. Eleanor, please. My God, Adrian. I'm sorry it took 6 years for you to hear from me. Don't apologize. Don't. I have been sitting in New Mexico for the last 5 years thinking that I failed you. I have been thinking it every single time I read a story about a new tower going up in our old market. I have been thinking it every time I drive past a construction site. Adrian, I tried to reach you. I tried for 2 years. You had changed your number. I had to. I know. I know you had to. I'm not saying it as an accusation. I'm saying it as an explanation for why I stopped trying. And then this morning I opened the paper on my porch, and I saw your name, and I saw her name, the woman who is helping you, Ms. Vale. And I sat down on my own porch, and I cried for 20 minutes because a thing I had thought was buried was not buried, and the young man I remembered was still in there after all. He closed his eyes. He was in the Meridian Tower. He had taken the call in the hallway outside 47B because his apartment had somebody's crew from a cable news outlet camped outside it, and he had not wanted to go home yet. Eleanor? Yes? You wrote in my second review that I would be a great designer if I survived my own conscience. Did I? Elena pulled the file. I read it. I remember writing that. I remember you, in that conference room, arguing with Robert Mercer about the atrium of a library we were doing. He wanted to cantilever it past what was safe. You were right, and you said so, and you got him to change it. I wrote the review 2 weeks later. I didn't survive it. Not really. I went quiet for 6 years. Adrian Matthew, you survived it. Going quiet is not dying. You came back. Most people don't come back. I have been doing this work for 40 years, and I can count on one hand the number who came back. He did not know what to say. What are you going to do now? She asked. I don't know. The lawyer says the criminal case is going to take years. I'm going to keep doing maintenance until somebody in the design world is willing to hire me again, which might be never. Adrian. Yeah. I have 3 former colleagues who have already called me this morning asking how to reach you. One of them runs her own firm now. She builds affordable housing. She has a project in Phoenix that she wants to talk to you about. Another one is teaching at the school we both graduated from and says they want you to come guest lecture next semester. Eleanor, I can't. Don't tell me what you can or can't do. I am 69 years old and I am telling you what is on offer. You do not have to say yes to any of it. You have to know that the world that ran you out 6 years ago is not the only world. There are still people in this industry who remember the design you did for that library and who, when they find out where you have been, are going to be ashamed on your behalf and are going to want to do something about it. He braced his forehead against the cool painted wall of the hallway. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome, Adrian. Do you have my number now? I have it. Call me. Not because you owe me anything. Call me because I want to hear your voice every once in a while. Can you do that? I can do that. Good. Go pick up your daughter. It's Friday. Kids need their fathers on Fridays. She hung up. He stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the phone. That. Elena did not ask him for anything that winter. That was the thing he kept coming back to, in his own head, when he tried to understand what was happening between them. She did not ask him to be her boyfriend. She did not ask him to move in. She did not ask him to come to her events, or to meet her surviving board members, or to play any public role at all. The Tribune ran a follow-up article 2 weeks after the first one, in which Elena Vale was described as the CEO who inherited a scandal and refused to bury it. It was a flattering piece. She looked sane and capable and brave. The piece mentioned Adrian only in passing. She had asked Carla Estrada to keep him out of it as much as possible. Carla had obliged. What Elena did ask him, on a Saturday in mid-January, as they stood in the frozen food aisle of a grocery store because Lena wanted macaroni and cheese for dinner, was whether he would like to drive out to the coast in the spring. He looked at her over a stack of frozen pizzas. The three of us? The three of us. I know a place. It's not fancy. It's a small rental house. It has a porch. Okay? Okay? Okay. That was easy. I am tired of saying no to things I want, Elena. She did not answer. She picked up a box of macaroni and put it in the cart. Lena, 4 feet away in the cereal aisle, yelled, Dad, can I get the kind with marshmallows? 1 box, not 3. 1 box is all I asked for. You asked for 3 last time. That was last time. Today I'm asking for 1. Okay. 1. Elena was looking at him with something that might have been laughter. What? He said. Nothing. You're a very good father. I'm a tired father. Those aren't mutually exclusive. No, they aren't. Later that night, after Lena was asleep, and Elena had gone back to her own apartment, he stood at his kitchen window and watched the snow start up again. His phone buzzed with another call from a reporter, which he ignored. It buzzed again a minute later with a text from Ray, who had called him twice that week to check in. You good, son? Adrian wrote back, I'm good. Ray wrote back, take Monday off. I'll cover you. Adrian wrote back, you don't have to. Ray wrote back, I know I don't. Take it anyway. He put the phone down. In 6 years, he had not once taken a day off just because he needed one. He had taken sick days when Lena had strep throat. He had taken a day last spring when the car had broken down. He had not taken a day for himself. He realized, standing at the window watching the snow, that he could take Monday off. He could take his daughter out of school and drive her somewhere. He could sit on a park bench for an hour by himself. He could do nothing. He was not the man he had been in December, the one who had lived his whole life on the assumption that every minute of visibility was a minute of danger. He still lived in that assumption a little. He would probably live in it a little for the rest of his life. But something in the geometry had shifted. The story had broken, and he was still here. His daughter was still in the same bedroom down the hall. His name was in the paper, and his landlord had not kicked him out. His supervisor had not fired him. The world, which he had spent 6 years treating as a set of trap doors, had turned out to also contain a woman who loved his daughter, and a former teacher who had cried on her porch, and a board member named Ingrid Varga he had never met, who had voted with her conscience at 5 in the morning. He was not going to start trusting the world. That was not who he was. But he was maybe going to start being surprised by it. He turned off the kitchen light, and he went down the hall, and he stood for a moment in Lena's doorway, the way he had stood 1,000 times, watching her sleep. She had kicked off her blanket. She had her elephant tucked under her chin. Her hair was tangled from the way she rolled in her sleep. He pulled the blanket back up. She did not stir. He went to bed. He slept, for the first time in a long time, without dreaming. Spring came late that year. By the time Adrian and Lena and Elena drove out to the coast, it was already April, and the indictment had been handed down, and Henrik Danzig had been named alongside two senior partners at Mercer Riddick and a man from the contractor's office whose signature had sat on a falsified inspection for 6.5 years. Edward Vale was named posthumously in a footnote. Elena had read that footnote in her kitchen and set the paper down and said, "Okay, that's how I'll carry him then." The rental house had a porch, like she'd promised. Lena claimed the smaller bedroom within 30 seconds. The second night, sitting on the porch steps with a glass of wine she wasn't drinking, Elena said, "I want to start something. A fund or a firm, I don't know yet. Affordable housing, done right. I want you to run the design side." Adrian watched the water for a long time. "I haven't designed anything in 6 years. You have a notebook full of specifications you rewrote from memory at 2 in the morning. That's different." "It isn't." He didn't answer. Inside, Lena was reading aloud to no one, the way she did, stumbling over a word and correcting herself. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Okay." They called it Park House, after Daniel. The first project broke ground the following spring, a 54-unit building on a lot Elena's company had owned and sat on for a decade. Adrian designed it with a steel spec he would have staked his life on, because, in a way, he had. Eleanor Shaw flew in for the groundbreaking and held Lena's hand during the speeches, and told Adrian afterward that he looked, for the first time since she'd known him, like a man whose shoulders weren't carrying somebody else's lie. Sarah came out that summer to see Lena for a week. It was awkward, and then it wasn't. She met Elena on the last day. The two women talked by the window for 20 minutes about nothing important, and when Sarah left, she hugged Adrian at the airport and said, "She's good. She's good for both of you." And he did not trust himself to say anything back. He and Elena were married on a Tuesday in October at City Hall, with Lena as the only witness. No photographer, no announcement. Lena wore a dress she had picked herself, pink, inappropriate for the weather, perfect. Years later, a reporter would ask Adrian what he had learned from all of it. He would think about the question for a long time. Then he would say that telling the truth costs you things you'll never get back, and gives you things you never thought you'd have, and the math on it is never what you expect. You do it anyway. You do it because your kid's going to be old enough to ask you someday who you were, and you want an answer. He had an answer now.